Hello, and welcome to Week 4 of the Introduction 2020 Faculty Perspectives Series. We've designed these programs to allow you to see the tremendous depth and breadth of academic and research interests amongst our faculty and preview many of the exciting things that you can study at the University of Oregon. Over the course of the summer, we are presenting faculty perspectives in 5 separate tracks that highlight the interdisciplinary nature of big questions. In our 5 programs today, we feature the School of Law, 2 departments within the College of Arts and Sciences, and the Lundquist College of Business. As a reminder to you students who are watching, be sure to complete your reflection on this program after we're done by visiting community.uoregon.edu. Additionally, the last 15 minutes of this session will be dedicated to answering your questions live on camera. In Zoom, please use the Q&A feature on the bottom of your Zoom screen to ask your questions of our presenter. Today's faculty perspective in the Engaged Humanities track will explore what you can learn about global communication and cultural literacy from the emojis that we use every day. Please welcome Professor of East Asian Languages and Literatures, Alisa Freedman. Welcome, Professor Freedman.
Hi, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I hope everybody is doing well. I'm going to start my talk today. Welcome to Introduction. My name is Alisa Freedman, and I'm a professor of Japanese Literature, Cultural Studies, and Gender. And the theme today is what we can learn when we look at the emoji in our phones. So to give you some highlights of what I will be talking about, I'll first introduce myself and why I study emoji. Then I'll launch into a mini lecture and then give some takeaway lessons about why emoji are important. I have a ton of slides, and hopefully you will take my classes. We will look at many slides, and the great thing about online learning is you could rewind the talk when you see it on YouTube and look at the slides more carefully. So please, if you don't catch something as I'm discussing it, please feel free to go back and look at it on your own. And I also wrote an article about emoji. It's not homework, but if you would like to read it, I've also posted the web link. So I'm a professor, and I teach Japanese Literature, Cultural Studies, and Gender. I've published many books. Again, I'd be happy to talk with you about them, and I edit an academic journal. And I have my students to thank for my research, because when I'm talking about something in class, the students have wonderful ideas. So I'm one of those strange professors that when you look at the acknowledgments in my book, you see all these student names being thanked. And in fact, today's talk is thanks to my students. I also work with Hamilton Hall, one of the residence halls on campus, and I organize pancake night, and hopefully we'll be back in person and eating pancakes together sometime soon. I spend a lot of time in Tokyo, and in the bottom row I put some highlights from my life. The Tokyo Olympics will be next summer. I'm very interested in how culture flows from place to place, and if you notice on the bottom row, the third block from the left, the second from the right, shows a mabie, who is a spirit creature that warns against pandemics from the 17th century. But a mabie has become sort of a fan art subject during COVID-19. And the last block, that's not me doing yoga, it's not my cat, but I've been doing a lot of yoga to get through the pandemic. So that's me, and I'm looking forward to meeting you through your questions. So again, I mentioned my research is thanks to the students, and they've taught me a lot about popular culture. Because as students, you're engaged all the time. Like one question I'll ask you at the end is, how many of you use emoji? And what I find talking to students are their grandparents sometimes use more emoji than they do. Like you get this message from your grandmother with like 16 hearts after it. Or maybe a student will send 1 heart. So we could discuss how people use emoji. And if you notice on this slide, at the bottom row, you see a woman that doesn't look student age. That's one of my research subjects in her 80s, but she joined us on Zoom. We had a class poetry contest, and she was our guest judge. So one of the great things about online teaching, too, I've been able to integrate my research on elderly women into my UO classes. So to give you more information, as I mentioned, I study how culture flows from one place to the next and changes. As it flows, it also changes the places. And I'm writing 2 books right now. One is about Japanese women who studied in Oregon in the 1950s. Pictured in the black and white photo is Professor Yoko McLean, who came to Oregon in 1952 on a US military fellowship. She stayed, and she became one of our first full-time Japanese language professors. And yes, that tree behind her is still there. It's now really big. So I've been interviewing these women and learning a lot about their lives, a lot about study abroad, and a lot about Oregon. I'd be happy to answer those questions during the Q&A. I'm also writing a book about how America curates images of Japan through television. And in fact, last week I just finished writing a book chapter about Marie Kondo. So now I feel inspired to clean up my house. So why emoji? So I've traveled all around the world giving talks on emoji because I find it's a topic that bridges everybody. Since 2011, the entire world has the same set of Unicode emoji pre-programmed into our phones with slight aesthetic variations. And as I mentioned, emoji have been inspired by my students, and I've spoken with different kinds of people about emoji. I got an email a couple years ago from a grandmother in Colorado who wanted to know what she should buy her 16-year-old granddaughter who loves Japanese popular culture for her birthday. And then the grandmother and I started on a conversation about emoji. Or I gave a talk at the Kansas City Japan Festival, and a 7-year-old walks in wearing like an emoji t-shirt. She's got emoji bracelets on. She knew so much about emoji. I gave her my business card. I'm like, contact me in 20 years, future professor. I've also talked with people in Vietnam, for example, in Germany, in Japan, in the United States, to get a global comparison of how people use Japanese popular culture in their daily lives. So my job bridges the humanities fields of literature, anthropology, cinema studies, and many other fields. And I look closely at material culture. I'm also, and I'll talk about this in a few minutes, I'm very interested in how we in Oregon use emoji, and emoji started in Japan in 1999. If you're curious, maybe you've used it, the masked face emoji has suddenly become very popular in the world in 2019 and in 2020, COVID-19 in 2020. And now one of the most popular emoji is the black raised fist for the Black Lives Matter movement. The transgender flag was added in March 2020. So emoji not only changed communication, but they reflect who we are and how we want our voices in the world to be heard. So one thing you can do on your own, and I ask my students to do this in class, is to take out your phone and take a look at the emoji in it, and to think about which ones you use. You may, when you look at your emoji, and don't do it now, pay attention to the screen, you'll realize that you have a lot of emoji in there that you might not know. Like, for example, we have the wave emoji at the top left representing tsunami, because tsunami are a prevalent problem in Japan, as in Oregon too, we have to be careful. Or we have a Japanese castle. The dolls on the top corner are not wedding dolls. That's for a holiday in March called Girls' Day. The fish cake at the bottom near the lunchbox, that's called the Naruto emoji, not named after the anime, but that's the name of it. And you have all of these in your phones. You probably didn't realize that. Hopefully now you will use them. But I believe that you can learn a lot about Japan from looking at the emoji: Japanese holidays, Japanese writing, Japanese money, Japanese culture. So what are emoji? The word emoji, when I talk to people in the United States, they think emoji is short for emotion or emoticon. Actually, the word emoji, as you see from the Japanese characters, is from Japanese, emoji. It literally means picture character. But officially, since 2016, the word has been pluralized in English language dictionaries as emojis with an S. But we don't say kimonos. Japanese nouns are sort of plural without using S. But emoji's taken on a special meaning in English. And in fact, the crying with joy emoji was chosen as the top English word by the Oxford English Dictionary in 2015. Is emoji a word? And as I just told you, emoji are not English. So what's going on? So especially since 2011, Unicode emoji, these are emoji that are approved by the Unicode Consortium, which is based in California, have been pre-programmed into global phones. So this means that people in Oregon have the same emoji in their phones as people in Singapore and in Sweden and in Japan. And emoji started to be used only in Japan Then it became popularized by fans through keyboards that could be uploaded through apps before they were programmed into phones. These are the world's first emoji. They were created by a man named Kureta. Japanese last names are written last name first, as I did on the screen. And they were made for use in Japan, and you could pause the slide on your own later and take a look at it. And you could learn a lot about Japanese road signs, Japanese cultural signs. Like in the third row in the middle, you see a yellow and white triangle, upside down arrowhead. This is a sign not for arrow, but this is a sign for a beginner. So if you're learning how to drive in Japan, you have to be 20 to drive. You will put this sign on your car until you're an experienced driver. So if you're texting someone about being a beginner at something, you'll use that arrow. So emoji depend on shared knowledge. These emoji, every year the Unicode Consortium vets all these candidates for emoji, and they decide which ones will be added to global phones. There's often debates like, do we really need all the emoji? Like, how many of you send polar bears? Maybe in the summer, I don't know, to cool off. But you can think about what makes an emoji something that people want to integrate, and we'll talk about that soon. But I put the term multiculturalism in bold, because that's a variable that Unicode Consortium takes into account. How emoji reflect the interaction of different cultures in the world, the coexistence of cultures. Any guesses of how many emoji we have in our phones? I love asking my students this question because they often say like 300. 3,304. My question to you again, do you use them all? Do we need them all? Do we need a menstruation emoji? Some people use this for other meanings, and we'll talk about that, but emoji have set meanings that are listed. This is the official emoji for menstruation, but it's also used for drop of blood and other things. So emoji can take on secondary readings. So the next part of my lecture will be focused on this lesson, that emoji are embedded in a culture of communication. But within each single emoji, there's a lot of culture. So one idea I teach in my class is that it's very important to speak global languages. And I hope you all take languages when you come to school, because it's a great way to open up the world to yourselves. And I highly recommend learning more about cultures outside of our own. But in addition to learning languages, it's also very, very important to learn the belief systems, the history, the culture, the nonverbal gestures, the popular trends of a society. There was an idea by E.D. Hirsch, a theorist back in 1989, that to fully interact with a culture, you need to be able to read its belief systems, its signs. And this requires knowledge of the culture. So to read all the emoji, for example, that I've shown you, you really need to know bits about Japan, or else you might get into cultural mistakes. But once you know cultural literacy, you could go to a party in Japan and be able to communicate. To give you a further idea, I've been following how different countries have reacted to COVID-19. And maybe you saw back in March 2020, there was a wonderful song created by the Vietnamese government to prevent against coronavirus by teaching you how to wash your hands. But it was picked up by fans on TikTok that created a dance. So through watching this video, you could learn many layers of how Vietnam communicates with its, how the government communicates with people, how people use culture. And as I mentioned, there's been a Japanese spirit creature named Amabie, originally from the 17th century, that's been incorporated in the middle in Japanese government campaigns to stop the spread of COVID-19. And fans have used Amabie in their own campaigns. So emoji are also political. When Prime Minister Abe, pictured here, visited then President Obama in 2014, President Obama actually thanked Prime Minister Abe for emoji. Granted, it's a little bit of cultural essentialism. Abe didn't turn around and thank Obama for the Kardashians. But you can think about how Japan becomes associated with popular culture in the political imagination. Speaking of Kim Kardashian, she was one of the first celebrities to create her own set of emoji. And she was the first person to give us the obscene middle finger gesture emoji. So emoji have been used in various ways to get people to do things. Like Twitter, during the EU referendum, created an emoji to get people to vote. Or people around the world have been creating amazing artworks out of emoji. Hopefully you all celebrated Emoji Day. It's celebrated every year, and you can look at your phone and see that the calendar has July 17th on it. There's a lot of in-jokes on emoji too. Like the book emoji has writing on it, and I'll get to that. But there have been several campaigns, like in 2020, July 2020, Twitter had an election to see which emoji people use the most, and they found the mask face to be well used. But my belief too, World Emoji Day has not been widely celebrated in Japan. And Japan is a culture that loves puns. Like August 31st is Vegetable Day in Japan, because 831, when you put it together, spells vegetable, yasai. But Japan also created other pictorial symbols, like used especially in Asia and Europe is the running man exit sign. And if you notice, characters run from right to left in Japan, because historically Japanese language has been read from right to left. If we had this exit sign in English, we may have our person running from left to right, because we write on the opposite side of the page. Or these are pictograms used for the 1964 Tokyo Olympics for foreigners coming to Japan, so they know how to find bathrooms and things. But what makes Unicode emoji so special? First, we're a texting culture, and I know you guys text all the time. I give my cell phone to my students, and it's okay to text me, but I ask my students to write their names, because I keep getting all these texts with no names. I'm like, which student are you? But emoji started in text messages to make sure the proper emotional message is received. And the first mainstream emoji was a heart mark. Because when you think about it, if you send a friend this message, how do they read it? Or great. Great. When did we stop putting periods at the end of our text messages? I love showing this to my classes because it makes my students really scared. Also, other countries have abbreviations, like LOL used to be used a lot in the United States for laugh out loud, or League of Legends. Or some people got into fights, like someone sends a text message saying, oh no, my cat died, and a friend says LOL, meaning it's lots of love. Maybe you've had this situation or heard about it. Because these text messages like emoji rely on shared cultural knowledge. I was living in Japan in 2006, and my friends kept texting me SKY, like sky. And I realized this was an abbreviation for the Japanese word supakuki yomenai, or super clueless. So again, cultural literacy, when we understand what people mean, we can communicate with them better. So getting back to different kinds of pictorial symbols, you can pause this and look at this on your own. But Japan has more than just emoji. There's also what's called kalmoji, or face characters, that are made out of typable characters. In English, we often use a semicolon and a parenthesis for a smile face, but these signs are horizontal in Japan. Some people say the very first person to use a semicolon and a parenthesis as a smile face was President Abraham Lincoln in the 1860s. There's a manuscript when he's trying to make a joke and uses this, but it could have been a typo. So when emoji started back in the day in the 1990s, early 2000s, there used to be a way to sell cell phones in Japan. And there used to be slight aesthetic variations. These are two text messages from Japan. Essentially, the message says, good morning, I found a delicious cake shop. Let's go to the cake shop together. But you could see that the emoji are slightly different according to cell phone providers. This difference is still maintained, like the big burger controversy of October 2017, when Android suddenly put the cheese on the bottom of the burger. That didn't last long, fans rebelled. Or now we have different aesthetic variations for saying mask. And do you know why? Since, for a long time, since more than 10 years ago, there's been a mask face emoji. Not because of virus, but because people in Japan for decades have worn masks to prevent against the spread of disease. So the emoji reflects that custom in Japan. But there's been labs all over the United States, like for example at the University of Minnesota, where people are studying psychological reactions to the same emoji written in different ways. Like these are all the grinning face, but Twitter looks downright surly here. Or the one reason the iPhone did not sell well when it came to Japan is because it did not have pre-programmed emoji, like Japanese phones did. So there's lots of misunderstood emoji that we all, when you take a look at them in your phones, like we have a person bowing and the triangles show motion. For those of you who are a fan of graphic novels and manga, know that this is a way in pictorial languages of showing movement. Or this emoji doesn't mean praise. It means good job or different kind of praise. Because in Japan, high five is rude. You don't do things with one hand. You hand people your business card with two hands. You congratulate them with two hands. So this is high 10, if you will. This now many people know in the United States is not being prayer, but being thank you, or technically yoroshiku onegai shimasu, a Japanese word meaning please or thank you. This is not a hospital. This is a love hotel. Be careful not to confuse it. But you can learn a lot about Japanese culture through emoji. Our people have been using emoji in ways that they have not been intended for for things that we do not have direct mimetic representation of. For example, some creative users in Japan were using this Japanese New Year's decoration as the obscene middle finger emoji until Kim Kardashian solved that problem for us. The Japanese government has also been looking at emoji with the Olympics coming up in Tokyo now in 2021. The Japanese government wanted to make sure Americans had enough cultural literacy to understand signs in Japan. So the sign for onsen or hot spring suddenly has 3 people in it. So 3 people are being boiled to death now, so that people know that this is a sign for hot springs. Also, Twitter, Facebook, other online media have been using emoji to monitor national moods. Like the most used emoji in Japan in 2016 was the vibrating heart for excitement, something we don't use that much in the United States. In 2016, the most used emoji in the United States was the sad face. I'm sorry this didn't, but this is the mystery emoji. Now, the most used emoji is the coronavirus emoji, which doesn't show up in all emoji, but it's actually technically the microbe emoji. Also, the black fist emoji has become very popular lately. Women, it took a while for emoji to catch up with gender politics. The only jobs for women in the emoji universe before 2016 were either being a woman going like this. This is not the sassy girl doing a half shrug. This is the receptionist, because in Japan, it's rude to point. You palm. If someone asks, where do you go? You don't say go there, you say go there. So she's showing you the way. Or Playboy Bunny. They originally looked like they had little like devil horns on their heads. In 2012, same-sex couples were added. In 2015, same-sex families. 2019 brought us gender-neutral couples, and skin tone emoji, 2015. But it took until 2016 to get a diversity of jobs for people of different genders. And now we're getting more gender-free emoji. And in all fairness, we got male Playboy dancers in 2016. So emoji, some last lessons for you before I take your questions. You can learn a lot about Japanese art and popular culture through looking at emoji. For example, some of you might recognize, maybe all of you, the middle character is Pikachu. And Pikachu from the game Pokemon, or the whole franchise Pokemon, represents a kind of Japanese style called kawaii. Or not just any cute. Kawaii is, I'm so cute, I'm going to manipulate you into caring about me. It literally means lovable. So cute characters are always looking at us, like Pikachu and Hello Kitty always have their hands raised, ready to hug us. They often have big eyes to show emotion, tiny noses or tiny mouths, and they look really squishy. Here we have the smiling poop emoji, which in Japan is short for the, to say yes in Japan, you go, To say poop, you go, unchi. So poop becomes an abbreviation for yes, But poop also has this kind of kawaii aesthetic of big eyes. But poop doesn't have a small nose. It has no nose, probably for good reason. And for years, people have been trying to propose to the Unicode consortium a frowning poop emoji. You could also learn about the Japanese fascination with poop from emoji. The best-selling children's book series of 2017 was Professor Poop Teaches You How to Write Japanese Characters. I'm sorry, I'm not making this up. This is true. And there's also the Lucky Poop from shrines, and there's various associations with the word puns using poop. So can an emoji alone tell a story? And as I mentioned on the Apple phones, emoji or Apple Medium, or platforms, the book emoji has writing on it. Any guesses of what the writing is? It's actually the Apple Think Different campaign from the 1990s. So there's all sorts of in-jokes. It's the same text on the clipboard emoji, but it's addressed to Kate on the clipboard. Yeah, when you become a professor, this is one lesson you'll all learn. You spend a lot of time looking at things. So I've been working on this with my classes. Can emoji alone tell a story? Like, what makes literature special is one thing that I explore in my literature classes. And I raise this question with my students. Can we write a book entirely in emoji? And most of my students say no, and I'll get to that point. One of the first books in the world to use emoticons was Lauren Miracle's TTYL series, which some of you may have read. It came out in 2004. It was updated in 2014. And the pages in the old first edition contain very few emoji, in part because emoji had not been globalized yet. That happened in 2011. The first books to be written entirely in emoji are from Japan. And there's a book called Trayman or Densho Toko, pictured on the one side of the screen. You see the characters holding hands. That's a book that uses different kinds of pictorial characters to tell a story about a 22-year-old self-proclaimed otaku or avid fan of manga, anime, and games who was able to get a girlfriend through the help of his community. Again, there's problems with the story gender-wise, and that's a topic for another talk. But my point is that literature in 2005 began to introduce different kinds of languages that changed the nature of writing on the page. There was also an advent in 2005 through 2007 in Japan of people writing entire novels using the 10-touch keypad on their old flip phones. If you have a flip phone lying around your house, try it. It takes a really long time. It's actually really fun, too. The first novels in America to be translated fully into emoji were novels that were within copyrights. Like the novel Moby Dick was translated into Emoji Dick, and it's now found in the Library of Congress. But as you notice here, it's very literal. Call me, using the emoji for phone. Or Random House came out with the series OMG Shakespeare to try to get children to read more Shakespeare. But I think they're cheating by using too many words. I'd like to see Hamlet entirely in emoji. And this is a challenge I've raised in my classes. We've done Hamlet's soliloquy in emoji. The Bible has been translated into emoji, but it's been machine translated and inserted mistakes. For example, as you see, the word stranger has the anger emoji face inserted into it. So when I'm teaching, I like the students to do the work. So we've held many emoji translation contests. And I've asked the students to translate because translation is a wonderful way to get to know a text better. When you translate, you think about what the text is conveying in terms of content, and you think closely about the language. And also not just about who's writing, but who is reading. And will the reader have enough information to fully understand the message? So I have the students translate a few sentences of their favorite books or favorite television programs or favorite graphic novels or commercials or manga into emoji. And then we have a contest based on how close they are to their source text, recognizability, translatability, style. And we use this as a jumping off point to have a class discussion about the beauty of words and what emoji do differently than words. Again, some lessons learned, my students learned that it takes a really long time to write entirely in emoji. It's much easier to use words. And when you use emoji, we were finding that students were avoiding the emoji that they didn't quite understand. Like the woman going like this, do you know what this means? This means okay in Japan. Like you don't do this or thumbs up, you do this historically in Japan. Or lately, especially from around 2018, this is a gesture in Japan called NG. That many of my friends in Japan thought it was from English, meaning no good. But it's actually Japanese incorporation of English. But again, the students were avoiding the emoji using gestures that they couldn't read. Or the food pictured here, the one with the triangle is savory, and the 3 rice balls pictured, the pink, white, and green, are sweet. We also learned, as I mentioned, like the running man exit sign, the emoji are all facing the Japanese direction. Because Japanese is historically written from right to left. So if you want to write a sentence saying the chicken will cross the road, like the middle sentence here, it looks like the chicken is going to walk backward, or even do like an old Michael Jackson kind of moonwalk, retro style. So we were having trouble with tense, past tense, future tense in our sentences. Also, emoji are mostly nouns and verbs. What if you want to say the green chicken will cross the road? What do you do? Like the last sentence here. This was one student's solution. So the lack of emoji was an impediment to the student. Wonderful translation. Again, at any time you could watch this video and take a closer look at my slides. But the student translated the first episode from a famous anime. I'm not going to give it away, but I can tell you the answer during the Q&A if you'd like. And the student translated, for example, there was no baseball bat at that time, so she had to use the gun emoji. Or this is a translation of famous Japanese author Natsume Soseki. And incidentally, if you remember way back to slide 3 of the 70-slide presentation, I showed you Yoko McLean sitting in front of Carson Hall in 1952. Natsume Soseki was her grandfather. So a professor at Oregon has one of the most famous people in Japan as her grandfather. Anyway, Natsume Soseki wrote a novel in 1905 called Waga hai wa neko de aru, or I Am a Cat. And the student translated the first few lines of this novel. But the student did a wonderful job and uses a technique we often use in our text messages of emphasis through repetition. But the student confused hospital and love hotel. I'll let you figure these out on your own, if you will. But the student on the left created a big single pane emoji of the entire plot of the best-selling novel of Japan, a novel written in 1987 by a very famous author. And the novel is framed by the first chapter of the protagonist, or the main character, is on an airplane. And he hears a song that reminds him of two women he knew, one who lived in the forest and one who lived in the city. And the other is a single pane emoji made using Snapchat about famous Japanese author Mishima Yukio, who committed a samurai-style suicide in 1970. So one thing we also talk about is what makes literature special. I'm not saying emoji are bad, but emoji is a very different form of communication. Chevrolet ran an ad campaign in 2015 with ads made out of emoji, and many people complained that they could not read them. So some takeaway lessons. Emojis constantly being added to. So by this time next year and the year after, we're going to have more than 3,000 emoji. People have also wanted emoji that represent them and the stories they tell. Like a young woman living in the United States helped integrate the headscarf emoji, as it's officially called, into Unicode 10 because she wanted an emoji that represented how she looked. The blue flat shoe emoji came about in 2018 when a woman was sending a text to her friend about going to a march. And the only shoe that she found to text her friend was a high heel, red high heel. So she wanted to add a practical shoe for women. So the blue flat shoe was created. Corporate logos cannot be part of emoji. I often pose the challenge to my classes, and if you guys think of any answers, please let me know. If you could think of something Hello Kitty is not on, she is on everything. But the one thing she will probably never be on is emoji. She could be on stickers that we buy or we upload from corporate sites, but she can't be on the emoji pre-programmed into our phones because she's a corporate logo. Just like the Olympic rings. So sports were added to represent Olympic sports, but we can't have Olympic rings. There's been debates if emoji should be on license plates. And in Australia, starting in 2019, they are. So lastly, I know I've taken a lot of your time, and thank you for listening so carefully. Why is the culture of emoji so important? Well, we've discussed many things, and I've brought up many words for you. We've discussed how emoji reflects patterns of communication. And to fully understand our own modes of communication and the people that we're texting to and writing to, we need to understand their culture that they're grounded in. So emoji also are designed to represent who we are. So one lesson that I think when you really look at emoji, you can learn about the world. So I'm going to leave you with a call of action. Look at the emoji in your phones. You can learn a lot about multiculturalism. For example, we have more different kinds of gender representation in our phones that we did in 2011. You can learn more about what's important to people, why people use certain kinds of facial expressions. The thinking emoji was the top emoji in the United States, the emoji doing this, in 2019. We have different forms of globes, like if you want Japan to be the center of the globe, you could use the other one. We also have globes that are more Western hemisphere centered. So thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to hearing your insights. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We have time for questions, and several questions have come in so far. So let's start with Kyle's question. You had talked a little bit about the inspiration for new emoji that have come along. Kyle wants to know, what's the process of adding a new emoji to an operating system such as Apple or Android?
Kyle, that's an excellent question. Emoji are often crowdsourced. That's one way of doing it. New emoji are vetted every year by a consortium based in San Francisco, the Unicode consortium, and they actually make some of their pages public. And it's fun to look at the emoji that they're considering. Some ways is you can propose an emoji, you could crowdsource it, you could design it. That's how the headscarf emoji was created, through crowdsourcing. I need to fact check that, I'll double check that. But I know the blue flat shoe was created by a woman who proposed the idea to a designer. I've also talked with students who are working for Google and other places who are actually designing their emoji. And it's something, if you're thinking of majoring in different kinds of art and design, this could be a possible way to use your major to work through emoji. So the decision is made through Unicode lately in San Francisco, but they take other factors into consideration, including national mood. So my students really want a mac and cheese emoji, so hopefully that one will come into our phones soon.
That would be fun. So one of the other questions that we have is from, and I'm sorry if I say your name incorrectly, Arista wants to know, I use emoji quite frequently, and I notice many of the emoji I use have different meanings than what the population thinks it means when they use them. Japan and America have the same or different meanings when it comes to emoji?
Excellent question. Emoji are what's called mimetic. They sort of represent what they're supposed to be for the most part. But people interpret them differently. Like, for example, so many people in the United States were using this gesture differently from the receptionist emoji. Or people in Japan didn't quite understand why Americans kept sending the eggplant emoji. So emoji take on what's called secondary meanings. So to answer your question, it's yes and no. Emoji have official, what's called encyclopedia or dictionary meanings. Like, they're grounded in a culture. But maybe you've experienced this with your group of friends, like you have your favorite facial expression, and you'll send it to each other as an in-group, or like you really think that, like, an ordinary person might look at your message and think it's a smile face, but you and your group of friends know that it really is something very different, and you're using it as a joke. So that's one of the beauty of emoji, is they rely on communal language. So yes, there are certain emoji that we could use around the world. Like before 2020, many people in the world thought the mask face emoji meant doctor and weren't using it for sick face. But now I think most people understand that it means something different. So I love that question because it really speaks to cultural literacy.
Well, speaking of cultural literacy, Sagan actually wants to know, in your opinion, how much has American culture been affected by the use of emoji? Do you think our culture would be different without emoji? If so, how?
I love that question, thank you. I don't know, have you had this experience? What happens when you get a text message with no emoji? I mean, I know young people tend to send fewer emoji. I get emoji from like 70-year-olds and I can't even read them because they have so many emoji in them. But I have heard stories of people thinking that their loved ones are angry at them because they don't have an emoji in them. So emoji really do a job of social soothing in the United States and elsewhere. Like if you send someone an emoji that just says okay, they don't know if you're really okay. But if you send a thumbs up, or now we have reaction buttons on our texting, and if you say a thumbs up, it sort of ends the conversation with okay, we're done, we're good. So emojis sort of take on those messages. So I think they've strongly influenced American culture. So much so that the word emoji, as I mentioned, now is pluralized and we use it in English. And many Americans think that we created the word. But they are, now you all know they're from Japan. So you can think of what life was like, or I like to do this exercise with my students to ask you all what life was like before cell phones. Like, you were probably born when we already had phones. But how would your life be different if you didn't have a phone? Or how many of you actually use it as a phone? So things are constantly evolving.
Thank you. Dimitri wants to know, what is the best way of finding the definition of an emoji so that you use it correctly?
Really good question. There are several websites like Emojipedia, sort of a wiki kind of version, where fans can upload, and also it's highly controlled. It's a good source to finding emoji, and they also list aesthetic variations. You could also look on the Unicode pages, and I like looking at the Unicode pages because they show the etymology or the origins of how emoji came to be. And I'm fascinated too by the cultural history of emoji. Say you're interested in the masked face emoji. You could go back and trace when it first came into cell phones and how people used it through looking at the Unicode pages too.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes.
Emma wants to know, looking at emoji as a language, can the original/official meanings of each character really still be expected to be the universal interpretation when the cultural understanding has evolved so differently around the world?
Wow, and I hope you become a linguistics major.
That's right.
That's an excellent question, and I believe that's one of the important lessons of learning language, is to think about, I mean, we all hear, like, for example, Eskimos have whatever, thousands of meanings for the word snow. Like, people create words that come out of a context. So we use emoji differently, but if you go back and look at the early slides I showed you of the first emoji created in 1999 in Japan, you really get a sense of what people were texting about. So again, it's language is constantly evolving, and every year, like this time last year, we didn't have the word COVID-19 in our language. So there's constantly new words. Or in March this year, I kept talking to my students about the word lit, because my students thought the word lit, they created it. I'm like, no, you didn't. It was created before I was born. That's from back 60s, 70s, the word lit was being used. So words are constantly coming in and out of language. So it's a really good question about origins of words. It's hard to get at the exact meaning. And that's one of the beauties of translation. Because what I believe when you translate, and I translate literature, and I'd be happy to discuss that, because I find it's a way for me to engage with the beauty of the text, that I can never get to the intentionality totally of the author. I have to use what I infer of the text as the reader. And with translation too, you have to think about how words are used in certain time periods and in certain contexts and in certain sentence forms. So that's one of the beauty of words too. They don't just stand alone. They're used within longer cultural utterances. So Emma, that's an amazing question. Please write like an honors thesis on that.
I was going to say, it sounds like a research question for the undergraduate research symposium.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
So Kelby wants to know, what is emoji usage like in countries around the world other than the US and Japan? And this will be our last question.
That's an excellent question. And I wish, I mean, someday when the world opens up, that would be my dream project, to travel around the world. You could come with me if you want. We could have a research team studying emoji. I can only answer this in the questions that I've had experience in, and I've done some research in Vietnam in recent years. And this is thanks to the University of Oregon, that I've been part of a research team studying flows of culture between Japan, Oregon, and Vietnam. And I've talked with mostly people within the generation of 20 to 25-year-olds in Vietnam about how they are using emoji. And I'm finding they use it differently than we do in the United States and differently in Japan. I mean, there's some cultural similarities, like when they want to show happiness, they show a happy emoji, or they use them at the end of their messages, predominantly not at the beginning or not in the middle. Like sometimes in Japan, I find people embed emoji in the middle of a sentence, where in Americans, I'm finding mainly put the emoji at the end. Mm-hmm. But in Vietnam, I'm also finding they use different kinds of cultural emoji, different facial gestures, things like that. And they also tend to use more, I find, or maybe it's just my research subjects. But that's another excellent research question to look at global flows of how different cultures have used this emoji. And one question my students ask me, are emoji going away? Like when you watch this induction talk and you're reminiscing about your time in Oregon, and you decide to watch this talk in 2050, are there still going to be emoji? My theory is yes. We may be using them on different platforms, but I think pictorial languages have become, because there's a saying that, as you know, a picture's worth 1,000 words. I don't think pictures replace words, but they have a function within global culture and communication that help us to express what we're thinking and feeling in certain ways.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for all the questions.
Yeah, they're great questions, and it sounds like you have lots of interested students coming your way this fall. So that's all the time we have for this program today. I do want to make sure for you students who are watching that we remind you to log on to community.uoregon.edu to submit your reflections on this talk and all of the faculty perspectives that you participate in to stay on track to complete introduction. Other ways that you can continue to stay on track to be ready for fall term include uploading your selfie for your UO ID card. We will be mailing those to you shortly in August, in just a few weeks. We want you to check your UO Oregon email address every single day. Keep an eye out for information about room selection in housing for the fall, which is coming up quickly. We want you to complete your financial aid checklist. And of course, I want you to be sure that you set your reminders to have your final high school transcript sent to the U of O and to submit your immunization records to the health center. For links to find out more or to complete these steps, I encourage you to visit our website at orientation.uoregon.edu, and you can click on Next Steps to find out more. For questions about this or any other introduction program, you can also email us at orientation@uoregon.edu or text us your questions at 541-346-1159. If you'd like to learn more about academic advising at the U of O, which is coming up quickly as well, please listen to tomorrow's episode of Flock Talk from your favorite podcast platform or from flocktalk.uoregon.edu. Thank you again for your time today and watching, and to you, Professor Freedman, thank you for helping our new ducks get ready for the fall.
See you in the fall.